We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our returning guest today is Marie Cyba, and she is a relationship coach, and I'll let her talk a little more about that. But what we're going to talk about today, I wanted to have her back because this is a subject that is, I know so many adults that are struggling with this, and that's adult relationships. It's hard to find them, and then it's a challenge to maintain it with busy lives and everything that goes on. And so I kind of wanted to, I did want to touch on it and certainly have a conversation about it and certainly clear some misconceptions of adult relationships as well. So Maria, why don't you tell us about you again?
Yes, yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Lisa. So, yeah, my name is Marie. I'm a relationship coach for women. So, I mostly work with women who are in committed relationships that feel really mediocre, kind of blah, and I help them transform those relationships from mediocre to mind blowing through a combination of manifestation practices, mindset work, emotional work, and behavioral changes. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I do. So, yeah, romantic relationships are definitely my specialty. But I think I have a little bit to say about adult friendships
Right,
as well,
right.
because this is definitely something that, yeah, I also struggle with, to be fair, and in all transparency. So I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. So thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
yeah. And yeah, and I was gonna say your TikTok and Instagram videos are really good on relationships and talking about just the little, details in romantic relationships. And I really appreciate those. Um, so
Thank you.
I will say with kind of my own experience, and I'm coming from, of course, a background of healing from childhood abuse. And so relationships were a huge struggle for me. So, and a lot of it is because I had a belief that I was told when I was young, and then I believed that nobody liked me. So I went into every single relationship with a mindset already that people didn't like me. So I had to try to overcome that.
Mm,
And and because I wasn't healthy either, I a lot of times got into some really unhealthy relationships. And and which just created more of a problem for me, right? And I didn't understand what was going on, and then it actually helped my belief that there was something wrong with me, that nobody liked me, so I couldn't have these healthy relationships. And since then, I've done a lot of healing, and I have really good relationships now, really healthy relationships. I don't have a ton. I'm just that person that doesn't have a
yeah.
ton of friends, and that's okay. Um, but for me, I make a conscious effort now to engage in my relationships, to reach out to them, to get together with them, to be there for them. And it's really interesting because, like I was saying, my old mindset of, well, nobody likes me. Well, I blew a lot of good relationships too because of that mindset. I didn't put any effort in because they didn't like me anyway. It was a
Yeah.
vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my story about adult friendships, and I'm definitely in a better place
Yeah.
now.
And I think, yeah, well, I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear. And I think it's so interesting. And it just goes to show that really it is all about mindset. It's about your perspective, how you choose to think about yourself and others, because your thoughts cause your feelings,
Hmm.
and your feelings drive your action.
Right.
And so obviously the results that you create in your relationships and your friendships, they are determined by your
Hmm.
actions. And so everything needs to align, right? You have to like really pay attention to your own thoughts and beliefs about yourself and about your friends and how you feel
Right. Right. And
and these thoughts and how you show up. And so, yeah, what it's no it comes as no surprise to me that as soon as you change that belief about yourself, that's when all of your friendships and other relationships started to really thrive and flourish.
And the other thing I think is key, and I know you're going to agree, is having a relationship with yourself to start with, right? And having a
Yeah,
healthy relationship with yourself
absolutely.
is really kind of, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert, but in my opinion, really key. Because I look back on my relationship with myself, I didn't have one. As a matter of fact, I did everything I could to get away from myself. Everything, kept
Yeah,
myself busy, mainly just so that I wouldn't have to be alone with myself. And so I know that for a lot of years, I used to say, oh, you need to be your own best friend. But I was great at giving that advice. I wasn't great at doing that advice. And so I had to really begin to
yeah.
look inside of me. And I actually heard the abuser's voice in my head one time and really was like,
Wow.
where did that come from? Like, I remember just thinking, and this vicious thought came into my mind about me. And I was like, where did that come from? And then I realized, okay, I really have to pay attention to my thoughts and I really need to rethink this. And I did build a relationship with myself and I actually enjoy my own company now. So I think that's probably a start, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd be super curious and interested to know, like, how did you go from, oh, nobody likes me to, I'm actually quite likable, or whatever your thought about yourself is now? Can you like share a little bit about that
Yeah.
process?
So a lot of it was getting to know myself. It's like I
Hmm.
believed everybody else's lies and I didn't have my own beliefs about myself. And so the biggest journey of that started in like 2016. And it was when I got my voice. And it was when I decided to start discovering me, what I like, who I am. And that is what really helped me. It's just like you're not going to really fall in love with someone until you get to know them. You're
Yeah.
not. And so I had to get to know me. And so that's what I did. I discovered I love color. I used to always wear black, and now I love color. I love history. I love trees. I mean, I could go on and on about things that I've discovered about me that I like. And so
Mhm.
that was really what helped me. And so I'm like, oh, well, I like me. And I think that changed probably my energy going out, right? Instead of putting off that energy of, hey, I know you're not going to like me, so I'm just going to be here. I'm not going to try. To no,
Yeah.
I like me, and I'm open to allowing other people to like me.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it's really comes down to know thyself, right? This phrase is so short
Yes, but so
and so
powerful.
simply like, yeah, it seems like it doesn't have a lot of depth to it, but it
Hmm.
does. It really does. It really does. Knowing yourself is key, is the first thing that you need to work on
Yeah, because
in order to improve your relationship with
I
yourself.
was
Yeah.
so busy being what everybody else wanted me to be because I thought that would make them like me,
Yeah.
right? So I used to call myself a chameleon, and so I was very proud of that I could, adjust myself into this relationship and be what they want me to be instead of being who I need to be. So that was, and I think that's not uncommon, and it's certainly not uncommon in the arena of childhood abuse and trauma. This is very common, but you're speaking on the other side of it. You're not, you didn't have childhood abuse, so wouldn't you say that that's kind of a common problem? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think like obviously if you've been through a lot of like abuse, if you've experienced like traumatic experiences, then of course like your story is going to be different, and there is going to be like more underneath that. But I think for a lot of people, nowadays with social media and our phones always like in reach, um, we get so distracted,
Hmm.
right? There was never a time like, and I even observed this with myself, like there was hardly ever a time in my day where it's just me with my own thoughts.
Ooh, and that's so important. You're right.
So
I have to watch that with myself too.
yeah, Absolutely. And so, because you're always distracted, because you're always on your phone or at work or talking to someone or sending text messages or whatever it may be, like, of course, you don't really know yourself. Like, you can't go through that process of getting to know you if your mind's always
Right,
in so many different places at once.
right, right.
And so, I think this is a very common theme that people don't really know who they are and what they want. They think they know, but they really
Well,
don't.
and I think it's not common for people to sit down and have that awareness of, oh, I need to get to know myself. It's like it's not talked about. It's not, really in the general population. It's not, oh, have you sat down today and looked at yourself and got to know yourself? It seems weird, but it's it's important. And I think that we need to, I have a friend that says, she'll just sit with herself for 5 minutes. She'll just sit with herself. No
Yeah,
music, no TV, no phone. She will just sit and she'll see what comes up.
yeah. And I love that. And I love that. And I think all of us, like, we should do this more
Mm-hmm.
often, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. That should be a daily
Mm-hmm.
practice. And yeah, but I just know for so many of us, it's we always say like, oh yeah, I should do that, and yeah, I'm going to, but we never actually do
Yeah.
it because, like I said, the phone, it's always within reach, and it's just so easy to just like grab it, look at something, keep ourselves busy. But that really prevents us from cultivating um, a deeper and more meaningful relationship with ourselves and with other
Mm-hmm.
people as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how often do you go out to dinner and you see couples or even families and two or three of them or all of them are on their phones sitting at the dinner table when those need to be put away and you need to be interacting? I mean, it's really sad. I mean, when my husband and I go out for dinner, the phone is put away. It is not even on the table and we're
Yeah,
engaging.
yeah, and I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's so important because then also, like, if you're always distracted, if you're always like checking your phone or like thinking about it, because that's something that I observe with myself a lot, is even though my phone is put away, I'm not really
Yeah.
present. I catch myself
Mm-hmm.
not being fully present. Oh, I wonder, what happened on Instagram. I
Yeah.
wonder if whoever sent me a text, I wonder if blah blah blah. And it's hard
Mm-hmm.
to stay fully present in the moment and really engage in the conversation. But I think when we do that and when we make this a habit, our friendships and all of our relationships, as a matter of fact, they become like they become so much
Mm-hmm.
richer
That's a word I was thinking too.
because 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 then you have that depth to your conversations and to your relationships, and they'll start to feel like so much better and so much closer. And that's when really you start to see the value of your relationships, because if it's always like small talk and, oh yeah, let me just like grab my phone and see what's going on, oh yeah, let's go for coffee sometime, but yeah, but not really. If it's that superficial level all of the time, like, of course your friendships are not going to
Mm-hmm.
feel great.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to feel fulfilling
Yeah, and that's the friendships that I had.
because they
Yeah.
lack. Yes.
I didn't put effort into it. It was like, oh yeah, 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 we'll get together. And one of the things that I've done is I have a few friends that I either go to breakfast or lunch with regularly, and we don't leave until we schedule our next one. you know,
Yeah, I love
because
that.
it's so easy. Time just so slips away. I mean, almost half the year is gone. It's crazy how time is flying.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so
Yes,
it.
absolutely. And I saw,
No, no,
oh,
no. Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
And I saw a thread from someone the other day on Threads that said adult friendship equals two people saying, "Oh, I haven't seen you in forever. We should really hang out more," over and over again until one of you dies.
Oh my
And
gosh,
I
that's so
think that
true.
sums it up nicely.
And that's what
Yes.
I'm trying. That's exactly what I'm breaking. That I don't make that promise. Like when I say it, I mean it, and I'm gonna hold you to it. um, interesting. So and I know with adult friendships that making friendships gets really challenging, and we have a few things against us as opposed to when we were children or even in our high school or even college. We had when we were kids we have all the time in the world to make friends, and we're in school and we're around them all the time. We're meeting them after school. We're, all the fun stuff that we do as a kid. And then I know in high school, it gets a little bit more challenging. You got other factors that get involved. And so it gets a little more challenging having friends and maintaining them. And then same thing within college. But once you're out of college is when it really gets to be kind of tricky. And I didn't go to college, but I mean, I went right from high school into a full-time job. And, your time, you don't have the time that you had before to go and play with your friends, basically. Um, and so, and you're limited in where you can kind of meet people because you're working or maybe you go out, but you don't have all that free time anymore. And so it definitely gets a little more challenging. And then, like for me, like I said, the one thing that gets in my way is time. It slips away from me, and before I know it, I haven't seen the person in 6 months. So, I mean, how can people find? I know that I have suggested, because all of us deal with this, but I've suggested a way to find friends is to get involved in things that you're interested in. Like if you're interested in hiking, get into hiking groups. If you're into dancing, whatever it is, get more involved with the people that enjoy the things that you do. What are your suggestions?
Yeah, no, I think these are great suggestions. But if you want to look at it on a deeper level, I think it's important and interesting to look at the research, because obviously there is
Yes.
research on this. And what the researchers found is that, the most important challenge that people identified when it comes to adult relationships and friendships is lack of trust, actually.
Oh,
Lack of time is in second place. So lack of time, or, even like not knowing where to go and how to find friends, isn't even the number one reason why we
wow.
struggle to make friends. It's lack of trust. And so
Wow.
I would be like, if I was really struggling to find friends and make friends and maintain those friendships as an adult, I would really look at it from that angle and ask myself, okay, what's the real reason here? Is it really that I don't have time? Because I feel like most of the time, like, we tell ourselves that we don't
Mhm.
have time for things, but we do have the time when we prioritize
Correct.
the things that we want to make time for, right? And so maybe if you're struggling with adult friendships, maybe there's something else going on. Maybe it's really your fear of being
Mhm.
hurt
Oh, yeah.
and of being
Oh, yeah.
rejected.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one for me.
So, yes. Yeah. And the fear of not being liked. And, it is scary
Mhm.
when you first meet someone and like you want to be friends with them, but you don't really know if they want to be friends with you.
Yeah, exactly.
And you kind of have to put yourself out there and be like, hey, do you want to hang out sometime? Would you like to be my friend? And of course, that gives the other person the opportunity to say no to you and to quote unquote reject
Right.
you. Because I don't really see it as rejection, but you could see it
Oh,
that
yeah.
way.
I would have for sure.
And so, what you're scared of, then first of all, you need to work on that,
Right.
and you need to overcome your fear of being
Mhm.
rejected.
Right. And again, it's going back with starting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything
It
starts with
really
you,
does. It really
right?
does. I mean, that is so true. It's so true. But that's interesting that trust is a number one reason. And I would say that for sure for me, but again, my circumstances are different than, we're not talking about just people that are struggling with childhood abuse. We're talking about everybody. So it surprises me that the regular people that don't haven't dealt with what I've dealt with have a problem with trust. And so it's the fear of rejection, it's the fear of them not liking, is that what it is? Or that's the bottom line, is just the fear of
Yeah,
rejection and being
yeah, yeah.
vulnerable.
The fear of rejection, being hurt.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it hurts. When we feel like we were rejected by someone, it
It
hurts.
does.
And that's what most people are afraid of. And I see this in my line of work. I see this all the time. It's like, the women that I work with, they're so afraid of getting
Hmm.
hurt. So afraid. And that's why they don't show up authentically in their relationships. That's why they have trouble voicing their
Hmm.
opinions, expressing their needs. like really showing all of them. They're super afraid of that. So much fear is, you know,
It's
involved in that.
paralyzing.
Um, it's paralyzing, absolutely. And it keeps you stuck and it prevents you from showing up as the most authentic and real version of yourself. And then again, like going back to what we discussed a few minutes ago around, your relationships lacking depth
Mm-hmm.
when you don't really give all of yourself and you're not really invested and you're not being vulnerable. And that's exactly what happens when you're afraid of rejection, when you're afraid of getting hurt, is you hold
Mm-hmm.
back.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. And don't, yeah, because, if you show that one side of you, that could be the one that causes the friend to bail on you. If I show my real self, they may not like me. That's what I used to
Yeah.
think. So you mentioned a minute ago, you
Mm.
didn't feel like it's rejection, right? If someone says no, you don't feel like it's rejection. So tell our listeners your mindset on that, because that's interesting, because that's totally what I would think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it is hard not to see it as, oh, that person is rejecting me, because that's kind of our default way of thinking about it, right? But really, like how I choose to look at it is, let's say I'm a cherry, okay? And the other person says, oh, Marie, I don't like cherries. I really prefer peaches. I'm like, okay, great. I happen to be a cherry. You don't like cherries. You prefer peaches. Great. Go have your peach. Go enjoy your peaches.
That is a great example.
Right? It doesn't mean that cherries aren't delicious, that cherries aren't great like fruits, They are amazing. They're great fruits. They're very delicious. It's just that the other person happens to prefer peaches.
Right. Right. That's a
That's
that's a
fine.
great example. I love that. And it's true, because the reality is not everybody's going to like us. We're not going to like everybody. We're not going to be like-minded. We're not going to connect with everybody, and it's okay. It's taken that sting out of, oh, they're rejecting me. It's like, no, it's just not a good fit. It's not a good connection, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And they might even have like other reasons
Right.
for quote unquote reject. It might not even be the case that the connection isn't there or that it's not a great fit. Maybe they're just in a completely different like headspace.
Exactly.
Maybe they are really strapped for time. Maybe they want to focus on their existing friendships as opposed to adding in another
Hmm.
friend because they feel like, oh, if I added in someone else, if I had another close friend in my life, like I wouldn't be able to really invest in all of my friendships. So I'm not going to do that. I'd rather focus on the friends that I already have and I want to nourish and really focus on these
Hmm.
relationships. And that's completely fair. And again, that has nothing to do with us.
Right.
Nothing.
Right. Right.
It's not, we're not being rejected for who we are.
Right.
We're really not.
And I will put it up.
And we don't have that person.
If a person does reject you for that, for whatever reason, like let's say they reject you because of you, right? That's not the person you want to be around anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, not everyone's gonna like us. And maybe that's gonna sound a little bit harsh to some of the listeners. But if you flip it around, if you think about, you don't like every single
Right.
person on the planet. You don't vibe with everyone.
Correct.
You don't want to be friends with everyone.
Right.
So it goes both ways, and it's okay. That's how the world works. It's really fine.
Right. Right. So just to kind of recap, we start with ourselves and building that relationship with ourselves, and really the best way to start that is spending time alone with yourself. Just start with 5 minutes if you can, with quiet time, and get to know yourself. And even I say journal, 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 but you can really get a lot of stuff out of your head if you write it out. And when you write out stuff that's in your head, sometimes it doesn't have the power over you that it did. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so start there. And then and then I guess the one suggestion I had was, like, get involved in groups, or I guess groups or whatever of things that you like. Maybe you'll meet people there. Um,
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, I'm stepping into that, right? I like to hike, so I'm stepping into a group of hikers, right? And so what do I do? Because I'm not one that just goes walking up to people, right? I'm not someone that just walks up to a
Yeah.
stranger. I'm not that person. I'm not the one that works
Me
the room,
either.
right? I got to feel really
Yeah.
comfortable. So what could a person do? I mean, what would be, I'm like literally trying to take this step by step to even help myself. Like, what would be the first step someone could do?
Yeah. I think you could also try to leverage like your existing network, your existing group of
Yeah.
friends, or maybe if it's not a group, like your individual friends, because they know people, right? They are in other friend groups. They have hobbies, they have interests where they meet other people. And maybe you can tag along
Oh, that's a good idea.
and you can be like, hey, I know that you go, I don't know, to Pilates every Thursday. Would you mind if I tagged along?
That's a great idea.
Simple as that. Simple as that. And for me, for example, like I'm also more of an introvert for
Yeah, me
sure.
too.
I'm not the one to initiate friendships necessarily. That's a little bit hard for me to do. But my fiance is the complete opposite. He is super extroverted. He has a ton of friends. Like it's ridiculous how many he has. And they're very close friendships as
Mm,
well because he really nurtures these relationships so, so much. And so for me, it's super easy to like leverage
right.
that because he knows so many people. And so, for example, if we go out to dinner with another couple, like maybe I can become friends with his friend's
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's a relationship that I can nurture and that I can invest in. And then that girlfriend, she's also going to have her friends. And maybe I can meet them at some point.
You just gave a really
And
good
so, really,
oh, sorry. I was just going to say real quick. You just gave a really good example of something else that you can do. Um, you can watch your fiance and how he interacts with people and how he engages with them and how he nurtures those relationships and learn from that, right? That's another thing you can learn from him.
yes, absolutely. There are many things I can learn from
Yeah.
him, but that is definitely one thing. Yeah. And I think that is also like it feeds into what I said earlier around, we tell ourselves that we don't have time to make new friends and nurture these relationships, but really we do. Like I see it with my fiance. Like he has a full-time job, he has hobbies, he goes to the gym, like he nurtures his relationships with his family members, like all of the things, right? He's
Yeah.
busy, but he still makes time for his friends.
Yeah.
And he's someone like if you text him, he's going to reply.
Wow.
And he's not going to ghost you for 3 weeks. He's going to reply then and there when he gets the
Right.
message. And that I think is something that all of us can work on if we're being honest. Because how many times, does it happen that someone texts you and you're like, oh, I can't be bothered right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to respond. I don't feel like responding right this second. So I'm going to put it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1 week goes by, 2 weeks go by,
Mm-hmm.
and you still haven't responded to that person.
Yeah.
And so, of course, like when you keep doing that, of course, the relationship is going to suffer. Of course, the other person is going to think, oh, I must not be that important to her
Right. Right.
because she goes for weeks on it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so, I think this is something we can all learn and do more of.
Yeah, and that's why, and we can now move into that where we can talk about how we can maintain these relationships, because that getting friendships is one part of it, but I think more energy needs to be spent on the relationships that you have, right, and maintaining them and nurturing them, as you say. I love that word because that's really what you're doing, and that is something
Yeah.
new to me, as I was saying earlier, that I literally need to make a conscious effort, because and I, there's a part of me that still feels kind of bad because I did dismiss a lot of stuff, but it wasn't because I was dismissing them. I wasn't dismissing who they are, and I wanted to have relationships with them. It's just, again, when you have that mindset of, well, they're probably not going to like me anyway, that at some point they're going to bail on me, why put the effort in? And it's like, it's so interesting how different my mindset is now. And I literally put stuff on my calendar. I literally put stuff like, you know, reach out to so and so and let's schedule breakfast. I put stuff on there because I do want to nurture these, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning what that means, and it's so let's talk about that, and you can even share some of what your fiance does too, which it sounds like he's really got it down.
Oh my God, he's really got it down. He's really got it down. That is true. Um, I mean, other than like being really present and really focused on, like responding and being in constant conversation with his friends, what I observe in him is that he gives so much. He puts so much effort into these relationships. And, whenever one of his friends comes up to him and says, oh my God, I need your help. Like this and that happened. Like, can you help me with that? He's like, yeah. Like he drops everything and he's there. And he does everything in his power to help his friend.
He's very
And
giving.
so he's really not afraid of giving. He's not focused on receiving, he's focused on giving.
Are his friends givers too?
And so yes, yeah. For the majority, I'd say
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, some of the friends that he has, they don't necessarily reciprocate in the way that like he does. Um, but still, I mean, all of them, I think, really appreciate him and his effort and his willingness to really be there and invest in the relationship. I think they all appreciate it. They can't always reciprocate, like I
Yeah.
said, but that's a great story. Um, but when it comes down to it, like what they really appreciate, I think, is just him being focused on the friendship in and of
Mm-hmm.
itself. Like he wants to propel the friendship forward. He wants to maintain it. He's not focused on, oh, what am I getting in return?
Right.
And I think that is very
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
I mean, that's really how it should be. Um, and it's I'm thinking back on that. I call her the old Lisa, and what I used to think, and I did used to think, what am I going to get out of this relationship? I really did. It was definitely a mindset,
Yeah.
and now no, it's more, what can I do for them? But I also have a different set of friends now. I have friends now that they all are very giving and caring, and we're like-minded, where before, because I was a people pleaser, I was the one that was doing everything and not getting anything in return. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard, and there's a lot of pain in that.
Yeah, absolutely. But how do you think you manage to attract this like different kind of human beings that are now your
Because
friends?
I'm much healthier, and I won't tolerate, I'm very focused on having like-minded people around me. And so,
Yes.
the inner circle is very small, and the outer circle is bigger. But it's definitely being like-minded, and I won't tolerate being mistreated anymore at all. So I'm
Yeah,
selective.
absolutely. And I think yeah, and I think that's a really good balance to have because on the one hand, you want to be very generous with, your time, with how you support people and how you're there for them. You want to be very generous, very giving, very kind. You don't want to be focused on receiving something in return, but also you want to have very solid boundaries in place.
Right, right. And let's talk about that a little bit, because boundaries are misunderstood, and they can be a little scary, and they can end friendships. They can end friendships, and they've I've
Absolutely.
had friendships end because I've set boundaries, and they didn't want to honor them, so I ended those friendships. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Tell me about.
Yeah. So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so I think the way most so I think the way most people set boundaries is they just say like, "Hey, please stop doing X, Y, and
Right.
Z. Otherwise, I'm going to be mad at you. Otherwise, I'm not going to be friends with you. Otherwise, you're going to hurt my
Yeah.
feelings." And that's how people set boundaries. And the problem with that is, when you do it that way, you really try to control the other person's behavior, and you're giving all your power away.
That is true.
Because if you say, if you don't stop doing X, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to be mad, I'm going to be angry. Like, you don't have any control over your own emotions, over your own experience. And so the way that I teach boundaries is you always need to have two things in place when you set a boundary. You need to make a request of the other person, and then you also need to give them a consequence that's going to follow if they don't honor your request. So, for example, if you have a friend who's always late, right, and you are just sick and tired of waiting for them, instead of telling them, hey, you can't be late anymore, otherwise I'm going to be super mad at you. That's not a good boundary, right? So instead of saying that, you could be like, hey, I just want you to know, like, the next time we meet up for coffee, I'm going to wait for you for 10 minutes. If you don't show up within that time frame, I'm gone. I'm not going to wait for more than 10 minutes, just so you know. And that is a very empowered way of setting a boundary, because that way you give the other person permission. They don't really need your permission, but you really give them permission to do whatever they want. Like, they can be late. They can be late. They can show up 20 minutes late. But what happens if they do? You're not going to be there.
I'm not putting up with that.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm taking control, right? Instead of telling you, oh, Lisa, I'm going to be so mad at you if you show up late one more time. Instead of saying that, I can be like, hey, just so you know, I'm not going to be waiting for you for more than 10 minutes.
I've done that one, actually. I've actually done that one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. And how was your experience?
They weren't late anymore. Seriously, they weren't late. They, and of course, it wasn't anything malicious on their side, right? But I do make an effort to be on time, and certainly if I'm going to be late, I will certainly let you know. And it was happening a lot, and it was, you're sitting there going, are they going to show up? What's going on? And so, and it didn't happen anymore. So, they were horrified.
That's beautiful. Yes, no, and that's a good example of a very effective boundary, right? And also what that's going to do for you is you're not going to be so resentful. Right? Because you're not going to sit there waiting for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, and be like, oh my God, where is this person? Why are they late again? Oh my God, I'm so angry. Right? That's how really frustration and resentment build up.
And it's not okay that,
and you're not going to.
Right. And it's not okay to say, oh, well, that's just how they are. They're just, they're late to everything. No. That's not, it's not okay. It's, people's time is important, and people make commitments to you, and it's important for you to make every effort to be there on time. And if you can't, you need to let them know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's really up to you to decide if you're okay with that or not.
Right.
You can be okay with that. No problem. If you don't mind waiting,
fine.
Then no need to set a boundary, right? But if you're really like, oh my God, no, this is not okay. I hate waiting.
Yeah.
And I want to respect my own time, and so I'm not going to sit here waiting. That's when okay, a boundary needs to be put in place.
So not all boundaries are said, though, right? There's some boundaries that you can set without saying the word. Can you give me an example of that? Can you think of one? I was trying to quickly think of one. But I feel like most of my boundaries are not always vocal. It's kind of what I do to set the boundary, and making myself available or not available. And I can't think of a real quick example right now. I wish I could. I hate that when I do that. But I don't know. Can you think of one? Maybe we'll just cut this part out.
I think maybe what you're referring to is that, you don't always necessarily communicate your boundaries, because, for example, if you don't have friends who tend to be late, you don't need to go up to them and be like, hey, just so you know, if you're ever late, I'm going to wait for you for 10 minutes and then I'm going to be gone, right? You don't need to do that. If the boundary isn't being violated, then there is no need to bring it
Right,
up.
right, right, right.
And so, yeah, probably most of the boundaries that you and I have, they're not explicit in that
Right.
way. And we don't tell people about them unless they infringe on those
Yeah, that's a
boundaries.
good way to put it. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah. Is that you don't necessarily, yeah, because I don't go up to my friends and say, I want you there on time every time, or I'm just going to leave.
Yeah, that would be
It would be
weird.
very weird. They'd be like, okay, we're not friends anymore. Oh,
Yeah, and no need to do that. No need to do that. You only need to do that when the boundary is
right.
violated, and if it never gets violated, perfect.
And then let's kind of switch gears a little bit because this is a tough one. So what if there's a misunderstanding, right? What if
Mm,
someone gets their feelings hurt? I mean, how do we manage that?
yeah. So communication is obviously key here,
Right.
right? And a lot of times, I feel like people won't necessarily tell you when they're hurt, because they're afraid of having these like difficult conversations, and they rather just avoid them. But you can tell by their
Mm-hmm.
behavior because, then all of a sudden maybe they start ghosting you, or they give you the cold shoulder, or they're just
Mm-hmm.
off a little bit. So you can tell that something's up. And if and when that happens, what I would do is I would just address it and be like, hey, Lisa, I'm getting like a little bit mm, a weird energy from you. Like, I feel like we're not on the best terms right now, but I'm not sure like what happened, if there was something that I did that hurt your feelings or that made you feel uncomfortable. Like, what's up? I'd really love to know so we can talk about
Mm-hmm.
this and get the problem solved.
So you're creating a safe space.
And yes, exactly. That is very important because these conversations, they are
Mm-hmm.
difficult, and you have to be like really open and vulnerable. And that is something most people don't want to do. So you really want to create that safe space for them, and don't wait, don't be like, if this person is important to you, don't be like, oh, if they have a problem, then that's on
Right.
them and they have to bring it up.
Right.
No, if the person is really important to you and the friendship is really important to you, make the first step. Why not? And open up that conversation.
Right. And what I was going to say is, um, on my side, when I would feel something like that from from one of my friends, and this is in the past, I would start with stories in my head, right? I would start with all kinds of stories, and first it was always me. Oh, what did I do? And I'm trying, you rehash everything, trying to figure out what it is you possibly did. And then I would get mad at them.
Yeah.
It'd be like, well,
Mm.
here they are having an attitude towards me and I can't figure out what I did. And the relationships would end up dissolving, obviously, and it wouldn't be talked about. Or if I didn't fight with my friends, so that didn't happen, but I know that that can be something where you can have a confrontational kind of situation. I, we just wouldn't be friends anymore. And now it is uncomfortable. And I actually had a situation a couple weekends ago where I had to deal with it. And I'll be honest, when the situation first happened, this is why processing is so important. Because when the situation first happened, I immediately was angry, immediately, and I went to the worst case scenario. That's where I went. Boom, worst case scenario. And I knew, okay, well, that's not rational. I had a minute to go. Okay, I went there, so let's think this out. And and I processed it in my head, and then I went from the worst case scenario to what I believed really happened, and it was escalated way down from where I was at. And then when I finally had to have the difficult conversation, I was right in that what the person thought is what I thought the person thought was exactly it. And it wasn't that worst case scenario. And but I needed my time, and this is really important, to process and to come to that place of being rational, because I wasn't being rational, right? And so I had to come to a place of being rational and much calmer in order to have the conversation. And the conversation was beautiful. Was it comfortable? It was not comfortable. but it was beautiful on both sides.
Yeah.
The person on the other end was not defensive at all. And in the end, it was a miscommunication. That's what it was. It was just a miscommunication. It was actually something that was this big, but when I hit that ceiling, it was, that's it. It was the worst case scenario. And I think we all deal with that, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and that's just how our brains work. It's our negative bias that really kicks in situations like these, where to our brain, this is a threat. Oh my God, something happened. That other person, they don't like me anymore. I'm being expelled from the group. I'm left out here on my own. I'm gonna die. That's what our brain makes these situations mean.
Right.
And so, of course, we start spiraling and we immediately go to the worst case scenario, even though it hardly ever is the worst case scenario.
Right.
That's the
Yeah,
truth.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
and so I think it is so important what you said around processing and approaching the conversation from this place of having dealt with it, having thought about it, and being in that rational energy as opposed to, oh my God, my emotions are so heightened. I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. I'm so scared. Like when our emotions take over, we lose control. And that's when these quote unquote difficult conversations, because like you said, they can be really beautiful, but that's when, you know, they really go wrong most of the time when we are not in control of our emotions.
You know what this has been, I had someone say this to me a few years ago, and I'm really bringing it into every part of my life, and that is to be curious rather than judgmental. And I
Yes.
immediately went to judgment. I came to not a conclusion. Absolutely. And I had to stop and realize, okay, that's way over the top. And I had to be curious. And so I started thinking, why did that person do that? And then I came to the answer. But I had to switch that because I so immediately went to that judgmental place.
Yeah, and we all do this. This is just human nature.
And
what is important is that we catch it.
exactly. You
Right.
just finished my sentence, is that we're, you know, and that's what I'm saying to people is pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to those emotions because those emotions are telling you something. And what I used to do is shut it down.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. I'm not going to feel that. I'm just going to go and react. And so it's really important to listen to your body, listen to those emotions, and then process and take that time and process it and not react in that moment. Man, I had to clean up a lot of messes and over the years.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what you have to do when you have these really impulsive reactions to the things that happen outside of you. And yeah, I think that's absolutely the way to go.
Right.
When you notice yourself like spiraling and your emotions getting really heightened, is you want to process them, and you also want to look at, why are these emotions there? What are the thoughts that triggered them? And are these thoughts true?
Right.
And does it serve me to think this way? Because like that's what we all do, right? We take our thoughts as
Right.
facts, and they're not. They're not facts. They're just thoughts. They're our own interpretations of things, our own opinions, our own beliefs. They're not facts.
Right.
Thoughts and facts are two separate things.
Right.
Very
Right.
different.
We need to question them. We
Different.
need to question them all the time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And this becomes much, much easier when you write your thoughts down. Like you said, like journaling is such a powerful tool.
Right.
And when you see it down in front of you, you can look at what you've just written, you can be like, oh, wait a minute.
It
Is this actually true? Or am I spiraling here? Am I like losing control of my own thoughts here? Am I like completely creating my own reality here?
right. Yeah, it's so true because it really disempowers any kind of shame or anything. It's, when those thoughts are rattling around in your head, they feel so big, so powerful, so overwhelming. And I've had examples in my life where I've written stuff out that was in my head and then I read it and it's like, wow, that's nothing like what was in my head at all. Like it's silly. It's silly of me to spend the energy on that, because there's just something about when it's in your head. It feels like it has so much power and it's so much bigger than what it really is.
Yeah, yeah. And the same goes for your emotions. Like they feel so big and so
Hmm.
important when they're like really strong and intense,
Yeah.
but then they start dissipating. Like when you process them, like they'll come and go in waves,
Right.
right? This is always how I describe it. And then eventually they'll just fizzle out and they'll leave your body. Like no emotion is
Right.
permanent.
You just have to give it time.
No emotion.
And that example I gave that happened a couple of weeks ago, you're right. I gave it time and I went from being very angry, to, oh, I get it. Okay. And it didn't have, there was no emotions in it anymore. I certainly wasn't angry. I was like, oh, okay, I can talk rationally about this now. Time is so important. I can't tell you.
Yes, time is important, but also it's like what you do with that
Hmm.
time. Because if you use your time to like push yourself even more and be like, yes, like she was wrong, I was right, like I have a right to be
Hmm.
angry. Oh my God, like what she did is unbelievable. That's not a good use of your
No.
time. Processing your emotions, writing your own thoughts out. This is a good use of your
Right,
time.
right. You don't want to be a right
And
fighter.
so it's not, yes, it's not time in and of itself that helps you. It's like really what you do with the time that you have and the tools that you
Hmm.
use
Yeah.
that are going to make all the difference. And I think it's really interesting what you said earlier, that it was just a miscommunication, just a misunderstanding, right? And I find that that is always
Yeah.
true. It's always a misunderstanding. It always is.
Right.
Like you'll rarely like have a conversation with one of your friends where it's like, oh my God, my friend is actually a bad person. They actually had bad intentions. They actually wanted to hurt me. Like, no,
Right.
no. You're friends for a
Right.
reason, right? You love this person. They love you. Why would they hurt you? Why?
It's interesting you say that because what I've said so often is when you know someone's heart, you know, and so when they do a misstep, you can kind of sit back and go, wait, that's not normally like them. Why did they do that? And instead of being judgmental and being hard on them, I mean, maybe they had a bad moment. Maybe they had, maybe they're tired. Maybe they're not in a good mood. Maybe something happened to them and they don't even realize that they're coming across that way. And so I often say, like, I know my friends' hearts and I know they're all good people. And if they do something wrong, it's not that they're perfect. I'm not saying they're perfect, but it doesn't make me get instantly
Yeah,
mad at them. It makes me go, oh wait, well that was interesting because they don't usually do that, right?
yeah, yeah. And trusting that they had their reasons
Right,
for doing whatever they did.
right,
They had their reasons.
right,
And if they're not bad people, if you know their hearts, you know that the reason was good. It was
right,
valid,
right,
probably.
right. You just don't understand. You don't know the whole story.
Yeah, you just don't know the whole story. You don't fully understand why they did what they
Hmm.
did. But once you do, and once you put yourself in their shoes, then you'll understand. And then you'll be able to access, empathy and
Right,
compassion. And that's when, the whole conflict it goes away.
right. We really need to, because I think about it, and you know, back in the old Lisa, it just feeling like everybody was out to get me. I don't know how many other
Mm.
people probably feel like that. So I went into the relationships with that too, and I was just waiting to look for that sign of them, you know. And I'm gonna find it. If I'm looking for it, I'm gonna find it one way or another because I'm looking for it. And and now I don't, and I just it's interesting how I look at people. I mean, I really look at their good, and I can really separate who they are from what they do. Does that make sense? And a great example is
Yeah, that
is if you have kids, you love your children, period. I love my son unconditionally. Do I love everything that he does? No, but it doesn't change my love for him. And that should be the same with our friendships as well as ourselves. We got to give ourselves a lot of grace.
absolutely. Yes, for sure. For sure. And the more grace you give yourself, the easier it is for you to give grace to others as well, I find.
Absolutely.
So that's a really important piece of the puzzle for sure. And ultimately, how I like to think about it is if everyone in the world always did what I would do, how boring would
I
that
know,
be?
right? It would not be very exciting.
When you really, it would be horrible. Like I can't think of a more boring world. Like 8 billion Maries. No. We need the Lisas and the Jennifers and the Lawrences and the, you know, Gustavos. We need everyone. We need everyone. And everyone has a right to be here. Everyone has the right to do whatever they want and how they want to do it. And that's a beautiful thing. And that we're all different and that we all
Yes.
approach situations differently. It's a beautiful thing.
And it's interesting because I said earlier that you brought up a really good point, but I was thinking earlier that, I say that I have a lot, my friends are like-minded. They are like-minded, but they're different. They don't have all the same interests that
Yeah,
I do. There's different things about them. And that's some of the stuff that I love about them because it is different than me and I learn from them. Right.
of course. Of course. And that is also a thing that makes a relationship so much richer
Mm-hmm.
is those different interests, those different personality traits, those different preferences, hobbies. You want that. You want more of that. You don't want to surround yourself with the same
No,
people who are just like
no.
you and who think just like you, who feel just like you, who want the same things as you, who are interested in the same things as you. That's so
Mm-hmm.
boring. Like we don't want that. We don't. Sometimes we think that we want that, but we
Mm-mm.
really don't.
No, I've learned so much from my friends and even my own son. He does things different than me, and yet I'm learning from him. So yeah, yeah, I love this. This is so good. So let's finish this up by let's list out some things that we could do to some good tips on maintaining relationships, whether it could be a romantic relationship or it can be a friendship. We're mostly talking about friendships, but some of the key things. So communication was big, right? Communications probably would you say is like number one?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe not number one, but definitely among the top three, I would say. I feel like for me, what's always most important is the commitment,
Well, that's true.
right? When you're committed to something, you make it a priority, you make time for
Mm-hmm.
it, you put effort in. So that's really important. Be committed, like, and be honest with yourself about how committed you are to your friendships. Is it your number one priority in your life right now, or is it not? And are you okay with that? And how much time, how much effort do you want to put in?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And make this a conscious decision and be honest with yourself. Make sure you like your reasons. If you're like, no, I'm not really all that interested in maintaining my friendships, like that's okay. That's fine as long as you like your reasons. So be honest with yourself and make it a conscious decision, right? How committed am I to those
Mm-hmm.
relationships? How much am I willing to? And then, do as you say.
Right.
When you say you're going to show up for your friends, when you say, oh, I want to invest more of my time into my friendships, I want to respond quicker to texts, I want to call more often. If that's what you say, then that's what you do.
Right.
And really be a man or a woman of your
Right.
word.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense because that's really kind of the foundation of the relationship. That's setting the foundation of the relationship, wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
commitment.
And then obviously,
Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, commitment, communication. I think those two are really, really big. Um, and just, I think it's always I like to think of it as, I want to give to other people what I would like to receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's how I handle my relationships and my friendships.
Right.
If I don't want to be ghosted by someone for 2 weeks, then I try to not ghost them
Yeah.
for 2 weeks.
Treat others as you're gonna
Right.
want to
And
be
I really
treated.
try, yes, exactly. And I'd say don't be afraid to model for the other person how you want the relationship to be. Don't just like wait for them and be like, oh, they should take the first step. They should make an effort. They should put something in, right? Model it for them.
You know what? And it's interesting you say that, because that's exactly what I used to do. Well, if they want to spend time with me, they'll call me. Again, that mindset. But now it's like, no. I'm making the effort. I am absolutely making the effort. Picking up my phone, calling them, texting them, setting up lunch or breakfast with them.
Yes, absolutely. Don't just wait around for people to call you. If you want to meet them, spend time with them, you call.
Because you got to think about the person on the other end and what they're thinking. Like we were saying earlier, if you're not calling and texting, or you're not making yourself available, after a while they're gonna quit making the effort, because they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and if both parties are in the mindset of, oh, if they want to spend time with me, they'll call, they'll text. If both people think that way, like no one's ever going to call, no one's ever going to text, and then you don't have a relationship. And so really what you want to get out of it, put it in first, put the effort in first, model it for them, show up how you really want to show up, very intentionally and on purpose.
And I want to touch on one little point there that popped into my head. What I used to do on that is, well, I make the effort and then they don't make the effort back that I'm expecting, right? So, and now I have a mindset of, I'm making the effort because I care. And all I want to do is show them that I care, show them that I'm here for them. It's not oh, well, I'm going to make effort to set up a breakfast with them, and so they better do that for me next time. It's no, I want to spend time with them. And so that's the energy that I'm putting out now, instead of that a little bit entitled kind of behavior that I had.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that is so important. Like, we should all do that, right?
Right.
Just be yourself, say what you want, follow through on your word, and just be the friend that you would want to be friends with.
Right. And
it's not that hard. It's not that hard. You just need to be aware of like how you show up. You need to be aware of your thoughts and feelings and your actions. And when you are, and when you make those choices very consciously, then, finding new friends and then maintaining these friendships, it's not that hard.
Right.
It's not that hard.
Right. And there's no, it's unfortunate that when we become adults, there's no little outline there on how we can have successful relationships. And so we've been fumbling through trying to figure this out, right? And so that's why it was really important that I do this episode, is to get out there. It's not hard, but we got to know what to do, because there isn't an outline or a little book that helps us, with relationships. And so that's why I know a lot of people, including myself, that have struggled with this, and it seems to be a problem that people are finally going, okay, yeah, there is a problem. Like, I don't know how to make adult friendships. I don't know how to maintain them. I surrender. How do I do this?
Yeah. No, I love that. And nobody really teaches us how to do any of it.
It's easy when you're a kid.
Have to wing it. Yeah, it just happens naturally, but also it's because you don't really think about it so much, right? You just do. And you don't have that self-awareness necessarily of, oh, if I do this, then what's going to happen? Am I going to get hurt? Am I going to be rejected? Is the other person not going to like me? Or we don't even, like, these questions, they don't even come up when we're kids. Like, we just go, we play.
The innocence.
No questions asked.
The innocence of it. Yeah, you're right. That's a really good point. I can see why it would be obviously easier for us kids, because we don't have all the life experiences that we have as an adult, and the rejection and the hurt and the, that we do as that we don't have as kids. That's true. That's a really good point. I like that. So, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we touched on so many different things in this episode. Like, I could go on for hours. I don't know how you feel.
I know we could. This is a subject that could definitely go on for hours.
Yeah. But really, what I would want to leave everyone with is, first of all, work on your relationship with yourself. Really look at that. How good is it? Spend time with yourself. Get to know yourself, your likes and dislikes, your preferences, what's important to you, your values. Oh my God,
Your
we haven't even talked about
standards.
that, but that's also your standards, your boundaries. Like, be really comfortable with who you are and be confident in who you are and what you bring to the table. If you're afraid of rejection, work on your mindset, work on processing your emotions, get really comfortable with uncomfortable emotions, and then, just make it a conscious decision how you want to live your life in general. But as we're talking about adult friendships, make this a conscious decision. How much time, how much effort do you want to put in? How important are your friendships to you? And then follow through with your word. Um, be the friend that you would want to be friends with. Show up as your authentic self, as your best self, and don't overcomplicate it. Communicate, talk to your friends, and then you're going to be fine.
Oh, I love this advice. I love it. So, how could our listeners get in touch with you? Because you are a relationship coach, so you do help in this area as well. So, maybe our listeners will want to reach out to you.
Yes. So the best way to reach out to me is through my Instagram. You can find me at that relationship coach. And yeah, just send me a message. My DMs are always open.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I want to say to the listeners, if you like this episode, share it with your friends and get the word out there. Subscribe. And if you have any questions about this subject or any others, please reach out to me. You can email me at lisa at healingandgrowinghandinhandpodcast.com. You can go to my website, which is healingandgrowinghandinhandpodcast.com, and you can fill out a form there. But we'd love to hear from the listeners because we are looking for topics. And so if you have any or any questions, reach out to me. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This was a great subject. I'm sure we could make a part two.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. I appreciate it.